Hello and welcome back to the Let Me Add to That podcast. My name is Elizabeth Graswich, Executive Director of Public Affairs and Communications at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. We are the largest regional education agency in the United States. We serve 80 school districts and nearly 2 million children. We are excited to use this platform to take a deep dive into the conversations surrounding our students and schools in LA County. Attendance can be an ongoing challenge for schools across the nation, especially following the COVID-19 pandemic. In response, LACOE created an attendance playbook to assist districts in managing and increasing attendance through practical strategies and resources. Think of it as your ultimate guide to boost attendance at your school. Joining me today are two people who are the backbones of the playbook, starting with the Chief of Wellbeing and Support Services, Alicia Garoupa. Welcome back, Alicia.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Liz.
Also with us today is Toni Banuelos, one of our new senior program specialists for child welfare and attendance, who is supporting schools and districts in our county. Welcome, Toni.
Thank you for having me.
So we're very excited to have you both today to talk a little bit about the attendance playbook and different resources and supports districts have and can help with this really challenging issue. So starting with the beginning, which is the overview of the attendance playbook, what were the objectives for what we did put together?
Well, our objectives were to start to meet this moment, right? We've had a couple of years of really problematic disruptions in student engagement and academic challenges that are a result of, what happened with the pandemic. And we know we need a new set of rules to work by in order to change outcomes and get our kids back to school. So the playbook is the beginning of our work in dialogue with our districts around the systems that need to change in order to get our kids back to school and address the impacts of the pandemic over time.
Something else we wanted to do was to make sure that it was user-friendly for the districts so that no matter what place they were in their work on attendance, they could pick it up and they can use the resources that we provided in the toolbook.
And, we're hoping that this podcast is a supplementary part of the playbook so that, we can help guide our listeners through the playbook itself, which moves me to the next section, which is connection relationships matter. And I think this one is so important because I don't know that everyone understands how much relationships really matter in attendance. So can you share a little bit of what you're seeing out there and how connections can make a difference?
Sure, I'll definitely start before the pandemic. And I did work in child welfare and attendance in a school district, and I've worked in a variety of school settings. It was pretty obvious then that the relationships that staff and teachers had with families and students had a tremendous impact on whether or not they would attend on a regular basis. I think my first illustration of that was looking at the attendance trends in my elementary school and seeing the kindergarten students and the challenges that in some classrooms in particular kids had in getting to school and coming to school consistently. And I think it was through that learning and seeing honestly where the teachers were making an extra effort to really build rapport with families that paid dividends in kids showing up to school with our little ones in particular. And I think in every setting that I've been in since working on attendance issues, it's very clear how important it is that children feel seen and that parents, who are sending their most precious, little or large person to this space, that there are adults there that love that child, that make that child or support that child in knowing that they belong, and in creating conditions where everybody wants them to go. So in order for that to happen, there has to be trust, there has to be relationship, there really does need to be connection.
And when there's trust, that's pretty significant because that's when you see the movement and the working relationships start to move in the direction that's both healthy for the teacher, the student, and the school. One thing that's super important is that relationship has to be respectful as well, and it has to really value each person in the relationship. So it's super important to value your students, your teachers, just the whole educational partners and community in general. Because that's the schools that have the best attendance and that have students that have really great outcomes, high graduation rates. They are the schools that make those connections, and the students and parents feel seen and they feel heard. And this is super important when you work in a lot of marginalized communities where most of the time parents and students don't feel heard. And it's so pivotal to the relationship and to the student's outcome.
I know I've talked to teenagers in the past too who have said they just want to hear that their teachers want them there. They want to see them. They want to see them in the classroom. So what are some small things that teachers can even do that help students feel seen and heard?
Well, if I can start, I'd actually like to go back to families' first experience at the campus. When students and families come to enroll, the experience that they have with that process is obviously a significant piece of the beginning of their relationship with that school site. So the more that there can be a sense that that is a welcoming process, I just want to mention that that is an important piece of this. And in many cases, our families, it can be a very stressful and problematic experience when a parent is working, they take a day off to, bring the paperwork, and then they're told they have to come back or that, something is missing. So whatever we can do to create conditions that remove barriers, I think, again, that's an important piece of that. And having the very front office and the gate itself, every one of my schools where there was a staff member that was known to the community, that was caring and was an excellent greeter, that was the first place where that relationship was being built. So I just want to honor that the role that support staff and all staff play in creating those conditions. And then with regard to teachers, something that I think was really powerful that I saw early on in my career was the idea of teachers before the start of school, in elementary grades in particular, doing things like home visitation and phone calls, personalized phone calls to parents before the child started school. That was a really powerful strategy where the intention was not for us to lay out as educators our expectations for children or talk about, things like that. It was really to build a relationship and to learn about that child, what that child likes, how they learn, and the experience of, and because as I mentioned earlier, the focus on kindergarten, having a kindergarten teacher, visit your home and learn about your child and honor the parents' expertise around who their child is, again, and what they like, honor and learn more about the family's culture and invite the family to the school throughout the year. That early seed that you can plant is incredibly impactful in support of that first day of school, right? Identifying, what are your plans to make sure you're there on day one? Do you know what time it starts? Like, what can I do to help you be comfortable? And know that I'm going to have your child's back. I'm going to care for them. I'm going to reach out to you with good news, and I'm going to reach out to you when they're struggling with something. But that relationship piece, it really does result in magic in terms of that connection that's really needed to keep kids engaged and have them be seen and belong.
I think something that came to me when Alicia was speaking was we have to provide strategies for everyone in our educational community. We have to treat our teachers the same way we want them to treat our students. We have to treat our students and families the same way we want our students and families to be treated. And we have to really look at that. I think some of those small nuances that sometimes people take for granted speak volumes to our communities, especially those cultural nuances. So I wish in a perfect world, everyone can experience or remember how they experienced, let's say, kindergarten. Imagine how scary it is to leave your home and to go to a different setting. So when you had those home visits, prior, you saw the person that your mom was going to leave you with on the first day, and that can really impact how you view school when you're little. And so taking a step back and really kind of walking in the shoes of our students, walking in the shoes of the parents to see that it is scary to leave your most prized possession with someone you have no relationship with. I think if we were in a different country and we'd ask the same someone to do that, they would kind of look at us a little funny. But here, this is kind of what we do, and these are our traditions. So, but that doesn't take away the feelings, the fears, the reservations. And so by really empathizing with our families, I think we can move mountains.
Yeah, great points. And also, the fact that it isn't just teachers, it is the entire school community. I know I've heard of bus drivers, for instance, in the past who just, that's like the favorite person that a child maybe will see that day because they're just so friendly and welcoming when they pick them up and drop them off.
we want staff to experience the same kind of community building strategies, the ability to check in with one another, the ability to say, I need a minute, I need to breathe, and that we notice when one another are struggling or when we're not there, because of course absenteeism has been one of our big issues. We need to see one another, and we need to show care and connection in order to build back something better than what we had before the pandemic.
Moving to our next section, another area that we see a lot of challenges with is the transitions with students. Even our own superintendent talks about that she actually dropped out of school 1 week after ninth grade. So those are really challenging times. So can you share a little bit about what our playbook talks about related to transitions?
Definitely. I think there are some key things to remember. And again, if we work hard to build community, even within that, kids are going to articulate between elementary grades into middle school into high school, that transition into school, again, as Toni alluded to, the very beginnings of something. I know, again, in my own experience, and I think this is consistent pre and post pandemic, the more, when it's new, there is a need to rebuild that connection and sense of belonging. So TK, we have even younger children coming in, right? UPK is on its way. And so we've got very young children who are coming to school for the first time, some of whom have not been in early education settings, some of whom have. But the way that we go about that is setting the stage for whether a child will feel connected, feel seen, whether the family will feel safe and comfortable. I think a lot about the students that I worked with who came into school partway through a year where by no fault of their own, maybe housing instability, they transitioned from one site to the other. Paying attention to that very beginning stage is such an important piece of, again, creating a sense of safety and connection and belonging that the child is seen and that they're going to be supported with the transition. We just have to be conscious that those are very sensitive times. And a time when there is some peril if we don't do a good job in building those relationships, especially when we see red flags. Again, I made a conscious effort of meeting with individual parents when a child started enrolled late, taking them onto campus and having them visit the parent center to kind of see what was available there, learn about the resources and connect to some people so that they have a sense of an anchor, that we were welcoming them into our community and that they were now part of our school community.
One of the things that I'm hearing across our conversation is the importance of communication. There's several different strategies. It's not just sending out an email, right? I mean, we're talking a lot about how important it is to build those relationships. So what are some of the things that we're sharing related to communication and strategies that we can do to support our students and families?
One of the things I wanted to go back to the playbook and talk about just moving districts to the playbook to take a self-assessment and to look at how are they supporting our students in the transition. And then also in the playbook, it discusses some considerations and strategies to use with transitions.
So with regard to communication, and then we'll go back to transitions, I think one of the things that I definitely recommend that districts and schools do is consider how they're communicating about attendance. In many cases, the parent-student handbook or whatever information comes when the child first enrolls or in an enrollment packet, it's enforcement-oriented, right? Or it talks about compulsory education. There may not be a lot of positive messaging around attendance. I know that, when I first started in a school district, we were still struggling with the culture of like the truant officer sort of mentality. And we know that compulsory education piece, we're not here to play tug of war with families about getting kids to school. We're here to create conditions where kids want to be at school, where it's exciting, and where, again, we have high expectations that are positively stated expectations. We don't just not want you to be truant. We actually want you to be in school. So I think evaluating how you're communicating about what your goals are as a district, how you want kids to attend. I know pre-pandemic there was maybe more of a focus on things like perfect attendance, but that has to change. That some of that messaging is no longer appropriate. I believe the state is just coming out with some new guidance around, attending school post-pandemic in terms of, if a child may appear to have a cold or certain symptoms, what is the right way when do you keep them home versus when you send them to school? one of the communications things we're definitely wrestling with in our educational system is the message that has been so ingrained in people that you should keep your child home if they have the slightest sniffle, right? And that has been feeding some of our continued chronic absence issues. So looking at current public health guidance, making sure that you have a clear message around when it's okay to go ahead and send them. And I've seen some districts doing that. I think that's a big piece too, because we have to refine our message and make some transitions as we come out of the pandemic to change people's mindsets around keeping children home versus when to send them to school.
I think some other things that we want to keep in mind too is making sure that we use multiple platforms to communicate our messages. A lot of parents now use text messaging, so the ancient or archaic letter doesn't really work anymore, especially when we're considering some of our populations that are always moving or that may not have stable housing or that are housing insecure. So this is really important because what was the norm is no longer the norm, and we really we have to move and meet our parents and family where they're at. Sometimes families will look on a website or look on a marquee, and I think districts really have to be conscious of where they're placing their information and whether it's accessible to everybody. Is it accessible to someone that speaks a second language? Is it accessible to someone that might not have a high reading level? So these are all considerations that we now have to take into account to really, again, meet our families. I think the messaging has to be consistent, and it can't be at the start of school and at the end of school. It has to be throughout the year, and it has to be in a timely manner for families. And this, looking at attendance and some of the attendance tips, which is coming out in our next series of playbooks, as well as illnesses and really helping that attendance dip and predicting it so you can plan against it. These are some of the things that will be coming out. But again, it's in the messaging, and it's being concise and clear and having the minimal amount of jargon, because in education we have so much jargon, and we expect our parents to know that jargon that we speak. And unfortunately, that's not the case with everybody. And we also have to erase that assumption that everyone knows how our education system works in the United States. We have a lot of students that are refugees, that are asylum seekers, and we really now have to start thinking more on a global level instead of a really narrow regional level.
I agree, and I'll add to that the idea that even seeking feedback from families about how they like to receive communication or what the best method is, again, to be responsive to our customer. Ultimately, students and families are our customers. So adding the idea that proactive communication is essential, right? That it's not just in a handbook that you tell people what the laws are, but that there's some positive messaging, that it's respectful, right? That the messaging is respectful of families and doesn't talk down to people. So again, we understand that there are requirements around truancy letters, certain language that needs to be included when you're sending those kinds of messages out, but those are not the only kinds of messages that can or should be sent out by schools and districts. There should be engaging and encouraging messages as well. Something that I think is very clear is that, pre and post-pandemic, parents typically underestimate, as probably students do as well, the number of days of school that they've missed, right? That is a known thing. So being able to set a positive expectation and encourage attendance and have some kind of healthy competition with classrooms, right, with grade levels, to make that a positive thing that the school is doing and paying attention to, and then sharing on a regular basis, as Toni said, how we're doing, which includes individual students. How many days has your child missed of school? Because in many cases, again, it's just something that we know from research. Families will underestimate the number of days that their child has missed, and also the potential impact of that. And again, post-pandemic, knowing that about a third of the kids are missing 3 or more weeks of school, right, are considered chronically absent, and in many cases, many more days of school, that messaging is critical. And our best approach is not, again, punitive or here's the law. It really is much more around, garnering that parent and caregiver support, acknowledging the really important role that they're playing, and working to eliminate any barriers to being at school on a regular basis.
And I think some common themes that we're seeing with the district is that they don't always communicate that goal with parents and children. So how do we expect our students and our parents to meet a goal that they have no idea that they're supposed to meet? So again, communicating something that's clear. And in the playbook, you'll see that there's a little chart for students to keep track of their attendance, because we do want to communicate, and we do know that they are capable of tracking their attendance as well as parents, and they can track where they're at, whether their attendance is proficient, whether they're in that little warning area, or whether they're moving down to that chronic absenteeism that we're trying to prevent. So I think that is super important to just make sure we're communicating, and we're not only communicating some of our expectations, but we're also communicating when there's been improvement. I know that when I worked in attendance, I would call my families that were doing good. I would track my students that would every month. And if they did improve, I would call them and say, "You're doing such a great job. What did you do? What changed? Keep up the good work." And those calls really made a difference and really motivated our students. So I think there also has to be a shift in our thinking and how we relay our messages. We need to move from the deficit model into that strength base. And we know research shows that when we start looking at what can be in a positive light, that's more motivating, and it's not discouraging when we stay in that deficit model. So it shows when we've done research, students improve when they're positively rewarded and their improvements are noticed.
And so much of what we're talking about is putting ourselves in the footsteps of the people that we're trying to serve, right? Like the empathy piece that you're talking about, and understanding how messages are coming across to whether it's the family or the student, not just what we're saying, but how is it being accepted by the individual that we're delivering it to. And this is all a lot, right? There's a lot to this. And so one of the suggestions in the toolkit is this idea of attendance teams, right, to provide support. So what do attendance teams look like? What does that look like for a district to want to put one together?
Our ideal attendance team would include a lot of our educational partners. But really, we need a leader that's able to make the logistical changes and direct the staff and motivate our staff, our parents, our students. We also need probably a note taker to keep us on track, and someone that has the data that can show us how we're doing, because anytime you put a team together, you want to be able to track your outcomes. What is the goal? Where are we going? What does our attendance look like? In order for us to really address our attendance, we need to disaggregate the data and really study it and figure out what's going on with our students. What are the barriers? What are the challenges, and can we support them? When the attendance team comes together, we want to make sure that we're looking at patterns. Data, the data will show us the different patterns. Attendance dips, does that look like maybe a holiday dip? And again, if we can predict it, we can plan against it. So maybe we do a Tier 1 intervention around the holidays so that our students will want to stay engaged and want to participate in that. I see a lot of times during that break right before Christmas and Thanksgiving, there might be a spirit week, and kids love spirit week. Anytime you can come to school in pajamas, you're going to see that attendance go up. So that's some of the great things about attendance, is it doesn't have to be this hard work. It can actually be really fun and passionate and motivating for both the attendance team and the students.
And if I can add to that, I think just the notion of having a team, unfortunately, in my experience, sometimes is a little novel. There are places where folks think that there's one person that's responsible for the attendance in a school or even at the district. And the idea that this is actually everyone's responsibility. We mentioned that earlier, right? Like, how does the bus driver understand what the goals are for kids' attendance? Being able to elevate that messaging, right? Those communications pieces, having a team of people that are bringing different expertise and different viewpoints to the systems that aren't working, right? One of the quotes in the playbook is, "Our systems are perfectly designed to achieve the results that they do." And that's a concept from business and manufacturing, but it applies in education as well. This idea that if we want better systems, we have to design them better. So there's a reason that the chronic absence rates are as high as they are. And we as adults within this system have a responsibility to make sure that we are creating better systems that can achieve the kinds of results that we know our kids deserve. Yeah, so one of the quotes in the playbook, "Our systems are perfectly designed to achieve the results that they do." It is a reminder that we are designing our systems. We have an opportunity to co-create better systems. That is, all of our communications, the data that we look at, how we understand how different groups of students in our school, different classrooms, different grade levels, you can learn so much by looking at that data and not just in retrospect, right? So it's one thing, and again, I've seen this happen in schools and districts, and I think it's a real loss when you're not looking at your data on a regular basis and having a system in place to say, okay, school community, this is how we did this month. And what are we going to do to make some shifts? We don't want to look at the data at the end of the year. I had a colleague who would describe that as admiring the problem, right? We can look back and say, wow, that was bad. Or throughout the year, we can be doing things to make adjustments that are responsive to what's going on. So having good data and having a team of folks who are looking at it and who are, again, bringing their expertise and their different viewpoints, including youth themselves, children and youth, parents and caregivers, school and district staff, to say, okay, here's what's going on. How do we do better? What are the ways? I think of the multi-tiered system of support, right? The strategies that we have in place that are in service to all students. Because if we don't pay attention to that, we are just reacting. Toni mentioned earlier, right? Just that if we're waiting for the child to be absent and then we're going to call and say, why are you absent? But we never make that positive call. We don't do any of the preventative work. We're missing an opportunity to get upstream and again, strengthen the systems to get our kids back in school and keep them there.
And we actually have 2 chapters dedicated to data in the playbook. I mean, that's how important it is and how important it is to learn how to use data, track data, make progress. So really encouraging our listeners to check out both of those chapters. But you mentioned a term that, another chapter dedicated to it that I want to go a little deeper on, which is multi-tiered systems of support. That's a term we use a lot in education. I'm not sure that everyone understands that term. And really, how does that apply to attendance?
Yeah, so I'm sure Toni and I will have a lot to say about that. So a multi-tiered system of support is just that. It is ensuring that you've designed a system that is responsive to all students and has strong universal practices in place for all students. So multi-tiered system of support it's a framework. It is used across instruction, behavior, et cetera. The state of California has invested resources in supporting districts in scaling up their multi-tiered systems of support. We've partnered with Orange County and I believe Butte County Office of Education to bring them into some of our own trainings so that we can support districts around the tiered systems of support. And with attendance, this comes back to looking at the data for all students, looking at a school site and understanding what the patterns are so that we can design things that strengthen systems for all students. That's in Tier 1, right? Universal best practices. Tier 2 being sort of more targeted practices. As an example, when we looked at the data in one of my district experiences, we learned that, kindergarten and 9th grade were areas where chronic absence was a lot higher. So having focused attention on those grade levels became one of our strategies. We wanted to put good universal practices in place, have people looking at the data, have teams, have strong all-student systems, but we needed a targeted focus on our ninth graders. And when we looked at that data even further, we learned that our students who were not passing classes in ninth grade, the students who were not promoting, because unfortunately in most cases, students are socially promoted K through 8, and then they hit high school and they hit a glass ceiling, right? If they didn't have the academic skills, in some cases, because of a lack of attendance and engagement, academically, they are at a disadvantage in terms of passing the classes and getting the credits that they need to promote into 10th grade and make their way out of high school. And I don't know how many kids I saw get stuck in ninth grade. And that second year when they're taking English 9A again, and with new ninth graders, and they now should have been a 10th grader and some of their peers have gone on, how demoralizing that is for our kids. So in that data, you'll find more information when you really dig into it that allows us to design better systems to support those students, to prevent those kinds of situations. And then naturally, unfortunately, with attendance, we're often prone to those sort of individualized intensive responses, right? It's like, oh, well, truancy and SART and SARB, and let's, do the compulsory education piece. That is extremely resource intensive, right? So having focus on individual families when no other system or support worked is absolutely necessary and it's important, but we can't make that our strategy. That is not a strategy, right? That is a response, which is why this tiered system of support is such an essential piece. I think of that tier 1 as the upstream work, right? Not waiting for the babies to come down the river and then say, well, I'm going to, catch the babies, but actually getting upstream, figuring out why they're coming down the river in the first place, and then doing something about it.
There's a lot of wisdom in what she says. I think, one, yes, multi-tiered support, if you look at tier 1 interventions, that is really the key to making your school better, because it sets a tone and it sets a culture for your school. And then it allows you to really focus and being intentional to your tier 2 and your tier 3 services. And it doesn't create a lot of work, because as Alicia says, when you get to your tier 2, tier 3 support services, it's very labor intensive, and oftentimes we don't have the capacity to service a large number of students. So if we wait for a huge group of students to move into tier 2 and tier 3, it's going to be very labor intensive. And that's what makes sometimes working in attendance very discouraging. But if you look at your tier 1 and you have a robust tier 1 that addresses a lot of the reasons, the challenges of students, then you'll start to see that there's less at tier 2 and there's less at tier 3, which is supposed to be what happens, and which is why it's supposed to be multi-tiered, right? Because there should only be a few at the top and some in the middle and all at the bottom. But what we're seeing in our districts is sometimes it's reversed, where the triangle is an upside down triangle, and some of the work becomes labor intensive. And then when they start looking at just SARB to be the only strategy that they're using, which is not a strategy, you start to see people become disillusioned and discouraged. And so then you start seeing, which we're seeing now, a lot of people not wanting to be on your SAR board because it's a lot of work and there's not a lot of change. So, but when you shift and you do the fun things, people love that. That's how you motivate families. That's how you motivate students, and they feel connected. So I know it sometimes it may seem like a lot of work to plan an event when you're doing tier 1 services for all of your student body, but what you get out of that will definitely lessen your labor intensive work, and it will eventually balance out. So you're really investing on that bottom tier.
Well, and the last chapter of the playbook talks really about how LACOE is supporting our districts. And we have something that's fairly new, which is our Child Welfare and Attendance Regional Learning Network. Can you elaborate on the benefits of the regional network and how people can get involved?
Yeah, so really proud Superintendent Eduardo supported our efforts to stand up a more robust child welfare and attendance support network for our districts, recognizing that we need to meet this moment. And so, Toni is here, one of our senior program specialists for child welfare and attendance, who are now out in the field with our district leaders and school site leaders, supporting the change that we know we need systematically. And also creating a network of folks, which I'm sure Toni can speak to in great detail, to help people learn from one another, what's working, working through those problems of practice so that we can, again, make the shifts that are needed to meet this moment for our kids and get them back to school.
And what we're seeing is every district is at a different level and at a different pace in their work. So being able to really focus on generally about 16 districts per specialist, they're able to really meet the needs of that district. And something that there are some universal themes that happen, but there's also some things that may be regional and that may not work. So a strategy that may work in Redondo Beach may not work in El Monte. So being able to really focus on that region and what works best for them, and to really use each other as teachers is the best, I think, formula for success. A lot of times we've tried things, sometimes on our own, sometimes in a group, and we failed, but we've gotten better at it. We figured out how to make the tweaks and the changes that we need to make it work. And so this is some wisdom that other districts can pass on to each other that pretty much are going through some of the same things and have dealt maybe with some of the same situations. So by putting them together and creating a network of knowledge, it's going to really benefit our students. And then to have someone that can liaison that information and to have it structured for the districts is very helpful, because we know that our directors are very busy and they don't have a lot of time to do some of the legwork for that. And I think I can speak, we put this playbook together to make it easy, because sometimes when you're researching attendance, you can go down a rabbit hole and maybe find yourself 2 days later with the answer that you only had 5 minutes for. So with that in mind, we're strengthening our child welfare and attendance unit to really support those districts so that we can meet the moment and we can change. And we're already seeing that our districts' chronic absentee numbers are a lot less than they were last year. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, and this is just the beginning of the playbook. You alluded to this earlier. So before we close today, can you just share with our audience the next steps, what we're doing next with it?
So we've decided to put our playbook into 4 series, and really we're looking at what are the common themes that happen around that time and how can we best support our districts so that they can address those sometimes themes that come up around the school year. So our next series will be covering things that go on in November, January, and December. So we see a lot of the attendance dips, families go on vacation. So we want to introduce some strategies to help address students' attendance. What are some ways districts can support families if they have to leave? And then we're also going to make sure we cover a little bit about student outcomes around graduation, because this is the time of the year where our high schoolers now have to start filing for financial aid. So we want to be sure that we're also preparing our districts to continue to help our students leave our district and to become successful community members and be able to do what they want to do, whether it's go into the post-secondary education or maybe a vocational trade.
So, we are so grateful that you have been doing this work, and we want to encourage our listeners to check out the attendance playbook or download it on our website, which is LACOE, LACOE.edu. And that's where we'll be posting the following chapters and editions of the playbook. Just want to thank Alicia and Toni for being here today. You can feel in the room your energy and positivity around attendance, and that just makes such a difference. I'm excited about it now. I'm excited about your work. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to our listeners for joining us today on Let Me Add to That. We look forward to talking to you next time. Take care.
Please follow the Los Angeles County Office of Education on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Los Angeles COE. That's Los Angeles COE. Or you can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn at Los Angeles County Office of Education.